Hello there. Welcome to my brand new Black Series Corner. I'm Mike, and what I have for you today is Star Wars The Black Series Clone Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi. This is the first of 4 Target exclusive figures released just a month or so ago, based on the 2008 Clone Wars cartoon. I'm not doing these in any particular order. He was literally just closer to me than the rest of them. They're not numbered or anything. For a lot of people, the Clone Wars was their first childhood Star Wars. If you're not in the know, the Clone Wars was a computer animated show that ran from 2008 to 2013. And then again in 2014. And then finally again in 2020 for the very last season. Until The Bad Batch, which is basically season 8, but whatever. That's not to be confused with the 2003 Genndy Tartakovsky micro-series, which is distinct and overlaps, but not considered canon by Lucasfilm. But still, it's a fun watch, and they just put it on Disney+. So if you want to see Mace Windu single-handedly take out every battle droid ever with his bare hands, go check that out. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the 2008 version here. It followed the 3-year Clone War that took place between the end of Attack of the Clones and eventually ran right into and parallel with the events of Revenge of the Sith. Seriously, if you haven't watched it, I can't recommend it enough. Yes, it starts slow and the movie, it's not great. But that's enough of the preamble. Let's get to the figure itself, starting off with the looks. Is this what we got in the show? And kinda, this is a realistic interpretation of Obi-Wan Kenobi instead of that Thunderbirds-y Go style of the animation they used. I won't be docking any points because of that, because this is a stylistic choice that Hasbro made, and it's one they've done with Rebels too, and I appreciate it. It gives a sort of homogeny to the line. Hasbro also went so far as to recreate the packaging for the original 3.75-inch toy line that I'm sure is very nostalgic for some, but not for me. At this point in history, I was not collecting toys, so I appreciate it on an academic level, but it does nothing for my nostalgia. But I do love me some Clone Wars. In this show, Kenobi's had a couple of different looks, but this is how he dressed for like 90% of the show, barring a few disguises he had over the many seasons. And for the most part, Hasbro has pretty much nailed the look. One of the things they did with the Clone Wars cartoon, both in the 2003 and the 2008 version, is add some clone trooper armor. I am here for it. I love the looks for the Jedi here. It really leans into that warrior monk motif, but some could say that maybe their armor were the clones they made along the way. I definitely prefer the 2008 hybrid look over the 2003 full clone armor look. But let's talk about the head sculpt here real quick. The head sculpt they used for this figure is the exact same head sculpt they used for the Clone Commander Obi-Wan that was based off that 2003 version. As you can see on mine, they actually got the paint right this time. I actually really don't know what Hasbro was thinking back in 2019 when they released that figure, but if you want to know my thoughts on it, I've actually done a whole review on it, so go check it out. Links somewhere. The head, though, is spot on to a post-episode 2 Ewan McGregor, right down to the set jaw and the concentrated look he had sculpted right into his face. And the beard is immaculate, I would know. From the neck down, Hasbro's actually reused some of the Clone Trooper body parts from the newer Clone Trooper mold, but they've also tossed in some original parts for great effect. But what I think Hasbro really nailed here are the realistic proportions and the silhouette of the figure. And that's something that I find, I just weirdly care about it. But that brings us to the low point of the figure for me. What does he come with? And what should he have come with? While a lightsaber is absolutely necessary for a Jedi to come with, it's also just like the only thing he comes with. It's also the only accessory that any prequel's Black Series Obi-Wan has come with. The lightsaber itself seems to be the exact same one that came with the original Episode 3 and the Clone Commander Obi-Wan, but with a much better paint application to it. I also really do like the thicker blade with that deeper hue. Honestly, it looks fantastic in his hands, and unlike the Clone Commander Obi-Wan, he can actually hold his lightsaber pretty well. Of course, the blade is removable, and the hilt plugs right into the spot on his belt. And unlike the Clone Commander Obi-Wan, the saber actually fits and stays on his belt. It looks natural doing it too. But that's it. It's just a lightsaber. It's a good lightsaber, granted, but it's just a lightsaber. So what should or could he have come with? Well, my first thought was, let's take a look at what the original figure came with, right? The figure that came out in the 2008 series came with an alternate helmet, which I don't think he actually ever wore in the 2008 series, but you know, why not? He also came with a rocket-firing jetpack, another accessory I can't remember him ever actually using, and I've watched the series a couple times. These would, though, have been a lot of fun had he come with them. It would have added a little bit more value, but he didn't. But what else? Normally, I would say a robe, but weirdly enough, I can't think of any time that this version of Kenobi actually ever wore one. Lucasfilm didn't want to cover up that badass clone armor, or they didn't want to get too crazy with animating new models. I don't know. I'm not a cartoonologist. But I definitely feel like, as always, alternate hands would have gone a long way here. Some fisty hands, some pointy hands, open forcey hands, something other than the reused clone trooper hands, and especially his patented two-finger, I'm about to lay the smackdown on you hands. You know the ones, like when Babe Ruth pointed out a home run before he hit it. This was Kenobi's way of saying, yeah, you're about to die. But he doesn't come with any of that, so it doesn't matter. So let's take a moment and stop dwelling on the sadness and start looking at something that's great. Let's jump into the next section where we talk about how the figure moves and the articulation. His head is on a double ball joint, one at the base of the skull and one at the shoulders. It allows for a very wide movement. Of course, it turns all the way around. It moves forward this far, back that far. If you pull out the shoulder armor, his arm can move all the way up like this. It does have a butterfly joint. He has a deep elbow bend, a swivel at the elbow, a swivel at the wrist, as well as a hinge. This wrist hinges this way. He has a decent torso joint that allows for a swivel all the way around. It moves forward this far, back that far. His legs can move forward this far, back that far. He has an upper thigh swivel, a bend at the knee, as well as a swivel, an ankle hinge, as well as a rocker. With this being Kenobi's widest stance, with both his feet flat on the ground. At some point in the 8 years the Black Series has been a thing, I've started caring less and less about which crazy poses you can get a figure into. And I've started caring more about how natural you can get them to stand. Just look at this picture of these two figures. The new one is standing with a very natural pose, arms straight down at his side. The Clone Commander version can't even lay his arms down at his side if he tried. It's like one of those bodybuilders who's just built up too much muscle mass where they can't really stand like a normal human being. Honestly, it's weirdly a big deal for me. Dynamic poses are cool and all, don't get me wrong, but so are reserved poses. I don't know. Unlike the Clone Commander body, which got its articulation from a 2014 figure, this Obi-Wan has all the modern updates a figure released in 2021 should have. It's got the double hinged neck, it's got all the shoulder goodness with the butterfly hinges, although they can be a little hindered, it's still got them. The elbows are also single jointed, but they do have a super deep bend, more than enough to pull off some really nice two-handed lightsaber poses. And finally, he has wrists hinged the proper way. His right wrist is hinged to go side to side rather than up and down. And that's weirdly a very big deal, especially for pulling off some lightsaber poses. And now lastly, we have the lower half of the figure. This is probably controversial to some, but I actually prefer the newer clone legs to the old. I know some people take issue with the placement of the knee pads, and I think that's a very legitimate complaint. It's just not enough to make me not like it. I just prefer the visual simplicity of the single jointed knees. It's not ugly. But speaking of which, let's take a look at the paint sculpt in detail. That was a segue. Despite there being some obviously reused parts here, such as the head and the arms and the lower legs and the feet, the rest is all new. The torso up here is a brand new sculpt that mixes the upper Jedi tunic with that armor plating around the shoulders. I love the look, though it looks a bit more like a bib here than it did in the show, granted. It's actually sculpted in a very soft rubber that allows the arms and the shoulders to have more flexibility. But it's also a source for one of my biggest complaints of the figure. First, the paint on the armor doesn't match the plastic they use for the arms and legs. And I believe they're supposed to be made of the same material and therefore the same color. It's a minor nitpick, but it's something I needed to address. My biggest problem, however, and from what I've seen, it's not just my figure, it's a lot of them, is that the paint is very sloppy. The alignment of the paint is like a fraction of an inch too far back, meaning the white armor plating starts a little bit too high and it actually goes back down a little bit too low. It's the paint equivalent of a mullet. Honestly, it's actually something I didn't really notice in the package or even from far away. On the shelf, it looks fine with the rest of the figures, but as soon as you pick them up in hand, it's really tough not to see. As for his arms, they're the exact same as the Phase 1 Clone Trooper arms. The shoulder pads are made of a very soft rubber to allow for a greater arm movement, and he also has a really cool Jedi crest painted on his right arm, that's left arm. And he also has a Jedi crest painted on his left arm, which is just neat. It's very sharp. The soft rubber goes all the way down his tunic into his belt, which is set over a hard sculpted torso, giving his top area a fantastic layered look. The belt area and skirt are all one piece. They're molded in the same rubber as the torso with some okay paint apps for the belt, I guess. It's a little sloppy in places still, but again, it works well unless you look too closely. The only other truly unique thing about this figure is mostly covered up by his skirt, and those are his thighs. I can't tell if these have ever been used before or if they're new, but from what I can see, these are unique to Obi-Wan. They're sculpted in pattern and definitely look like they're supposed to be what's under clone armor. It's under armor, if you will. And then we have his feet. They're the exact same as the newer Phase 1 Clone Trooper from 2020. And that's just, it is what it is. It's just a thing. Overall, I think Hasbro did a fantastic job here of using some new and reused parts to give us a brand new figure. I just wish that the paint had been a little bit better. So let's take a moment and move on to the last section, which is the want, availability, and value. Before Hasbro announced these figures back in May, there were some fan concepts floating around the internet. And I'd be lying if I said they didn't get my hopes up that we see something like this in the line. The Clone Wars cartoon is collectively one of the best things in the entire Star Wars universe, and these are unique and iconic looks for major and popular characters. So yeah, the want was there, but let's talk about that availability though, am I right? You see, this is a Target exclusive, and in these parts, that's a no-no word. Until recently, I've personally never really had an issue getting a Black Series Target exclusive. G.I. Joe, different issue. Although I still hold the opinion that exclusives suck, and being forced to rely on one store or store chain to obtain a figure is never a positive for the consumer. But recently, Target has had a reputation. Either it's a highly sought after figure that sells out instantly to bots online, or it's a peg-warming figure that no one wants and gets clearanced out in a few months. Or an actress gets fired and they all get bought up by people hoping to make a buck online. Either way, it involves scalpers. But I do have to say with this, Target seems to be doing better. Granted, I never personally saw Obi-Wan in store. I got mine from Patreon supporter Colin. He snagged me both the Kenobi and the Hawk at cost plus shipping. What a stand-up guy. Seriously, thanks. But let's talk about the price. In 2020, Hasbro basically raised the price of all exclusive figures to $24.99. That's a $5 premium just because it came from a specific store. These are no exception, except now Hasbro seems to have raised the price again on these figures even more, and Target's charging $26.49 for them. That is nuts. You're paying almost $7 more for a figure that would have been $19.99 just 2 years ago. But I get it, inflation is a bitch. Prices are gonna go up. It just sucks. But also, value isn't necessarily just about the price. It's price plus what you get for it, divided by how much trouble you had to go through to get it, multiplied by the nostalgia factor for it. That's a real mathematical equation I just came up with off the top of my head. For me, the value's really not super there, but the want is. And the availability, I mean, I want to err on the side of giving Target and Hasbro credit where credit is due. This release was pretty well available, at least for people in the US. So with that, I'm going to give the figure a final score of 3.75 out of 5. I want to score this higher than the highest ground possible. Without being objective, just guessing what the number in my heart tells me that this figure should be, just seeing it on my shelves, I would give it a 4 easily. But as much as I love it, I do think that the sloppy paintwork, the lack of accessories, the high price point, and the exclusive nature of the figure just bring it down to that 3.75 level. But that doesn't stop me from thoroughly enjoying this figure. This was the first official desk toy of my brand new toy room for a few weeks. Could it be better? Sure. But is it good? Very sure. And I definitely look forward to seeing what Hasbro does more in this area. I just want more Jedi with these Clone Wars looks. Notably, Mace Windu and Plo Koon easily come to mind. So with that, that's my review of Clone Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi. Let me know down in the downstairs area what you thought of it. Also, it's a random question. Do you think that Corky is the secret love child between Satine and Obi-Wan? Because I do. Anyways, let me know down in the downstairs area. I love to read and respond to all the comments. I'd also love to take a moment and thank these people here for supporting me on Patreon at a Black Series level or higher. Thanks a lot. It means a lot to me that these people do that. If you want to see your name here, you can head over to my Patreon. If that's not your thing, down in the downstairs area, there's a couple different ways that you can help out the channel, up to it including, liking, sharing, subscribing. Those things are free. I do have a YouTube membership you can join as well, but that's it. Seriously, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for getting this far, and I'll see you later. Bye.